Well, hello friends and welcome to Ask Zach. Today we are going to talk about 4 forgotten R&B guitar greats. These guys played on incredibly iconic tunes and their names have kind of been forgotten, or worse yet, their guitar parts have been credited to other guitarists. And so today we're going to right a wrong and we're going to talk about Chips Moman, Tommy Cogbill, Booker T. Jones, and Joe South. These guys played on big R&B guitar hits, and their names are probably not really known, or maybe they're known for other things. Like Booker T. Jones is known for being a B3 player, but not many people know he's a wonderful guitarist. So we're going to right that wrong today. Before we dive in, I need to thank my Patreon supporters. They are truly what keeps this channel going. And if you love the channel and want to support it, well then go down in the description and follow the link. Thanks. All right, let's start off. So our first guitarist is Chips Moman. And he played that wonderful guitar part on Respect by Aretha Franklin. And yes, he has been, had the unfortunate insult that was not on purpose by many journalists, that they've credited his guitar part to other guitarists. So I've seen in print where that guitar part has been credited to Steve Cropper or Cornell Dupree, and those make sense. And frankly, there's not a lot of session information, and the only reason that I know, to be fair to these journalists that got it wrong, I had to ask the other guitarist that was on the session. And so the other guitarist was Jimmy Johnson, who I was fortunate enough to interview about less than a year before he passed away. And he was the one that told me that for certain that was Chips Moman playing the guitar part on Respect. So here it is. It's in the key of C, and a lot of people play it, they just play the single note part of it. They just do the... But to really get it right, you've got to get the third in there, before you do the bend. So you got to go... In other words, you're hitting that, that E note on the G string, and you're hitting, that 5, that G on the B string. And that's a great, great guitar part. And Chips was a great guitar player. And you probably, if you're into music history, you probably know Chips as a record producer and a songwriter, because he would gather a lot more fame producing Elvis and, all sorts of other acts while he was in Memphis. And then when he moved to Nashville, he produced, Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson, some of their biggest hits. He wrote Lukenbach, Texas. It was a major hit for Waylon Jennings. He produced The Highwaymen, which was, of course, Johnny Cash and Chris Christopherson, Waylon and Willie. But to really tell his story, you have to go all the way back to LaGrange, Georgia, where he was born. And he was born Lincoln Wayne Moman. And he moved to Memphis and started, and this is in the late 1950s, and he worked with rockabilly acts like the Burnett Brothers and others. And then he moved out to Los Angeles and he worked at Gold Star for a while, and he learned about recording and engineering. And then around 60 or so, late 50s, early 60s, he moved back to Memphis, and he was working with Jim Stewart and Mae Axton and helped them start STAX. And Chips produced the early hits on STAX, like You Don't Miss Your Water for William Bell, and also Gee Whiz for Carla Thomas. Now, unfortunately, in '62, they had a disagreement over money. I think it had to do with residuals and whether Chips was really a partner or getting points or something to that effect, but they parted ways. And then Chips, I was told that there was some type of legal, settlement between he and Jim Stewart, and he ended up with some money, and he was able to start American Studios, where of course he hired what we now call the Memphis Boys, which were Reggie Young on guitar, Tommy Cogbill on bass, Bobby Emmons, Bobby Wood, and Gene Chrisman, on drums. Of course, the Bobbies were the keyboard players. But Chips continued to play guitar for a while until he was actually able to get a studio and get everything going. And so he ended up playing on sessions for Atlantic that some of them were cut in Muscle Shoals and some of them were cut in New York City at Atlantic Studios there. And so he was a part of the group that flew up from Memphis and Muscle Shoals up to New York City to make some of Aretha's early records. He also was part of the cuts that were done down in Muscle Shoals with Wilson Pickett, like Mustang Sally. That's Chips playing on those tunes also. If you're wondering where he got the nickname Chips, it was because he loved to gamble. One of my friends knew Chips, and he said Chips was a, quote, dangerous man, and he was not someone to be trifled with. And yeah, he was a serious dude, talented guy. He was serious about making money, and that was why he shifted from playing guitar to being a producer and songwriter, because he always followed the money, and he saw where the money was. It was in residuals and such. And so that's why he moved away from guitar playing and hired Reggie Young instead. So yeah, Chips, what a great player. Usually played a Fender. Most shots that I've been able to find show him playing a Strat, but he played that wonderful line on Respect. All right, so that's number one. Let's get down to guitarist number two, which is Tommy Cogbill. So Tommy Cogbill is mainly known as a bass player, and he was the bassist in the Memphis Boys. And he played bass on all the early Aretha Franklin hits, like Chain of Fools and Respect and others. However, when they started making the album Aretha Now, and they were flying the guys up to New York, it was decided that Tommy was going to move over to guitar and that Jerry Jamont was going to be the bass player. And so that was a shift. And so Tommy, who had mainly been heard as a bassist and had played on a lot of hits as a bassist, all of a sudden was playing guitar. And so this album has a number of hits on it. One of the tunes is Think. Think about what you're trying to do to me. And in that, now there's two guitarists on Aretha Now. One is Jimmy Johnson, who's playing rhythm, and then there's Tommy Cogbill playing lead. Also, of course, you can hear Tommy playing really great gut string stuff on Say a Little Prayer for Me. Say a Little Prayer for You, I guess. But one of the tunes I really like is Seesaw, where Tommy plays, he's playing a Telecaster, and you can see in the photos he's playing this era of Tele, blonde Maplecap. This is a 67. I can't tell whether his is a CBS logo or a Transition logo, but playing this era of guitar. And the song's in the key of C, and he's kind of chunking it and also playing this, playing that kind of thing in the in the verses, and then as kind of a lick to connect the verse into the chorus, he plays it, and then he plays some cool kind of bluesy fills, and then he plays it up an octave, but instead of bending, he does a trill, which makes sense because he was really a bebop player. But yeah, Tommy, was such a great player. And then on the tune Think, he plays this kind of busy, and that's in B flat, and then, or maybe it's in B, and then, yeah, it's in B flat and then goes up to B. But he plays these kind of busy lines that are underneath the second verse. And so if you listen to that track, you'll hear these kind of climbing Telecaster back pickup kind of thing. And yeah, so on that Aretha Now record, all of the lead guitar work is Tommy Cogbill, and he did a great job, and that's a great record. A little side note on the Telecaster and such that he used was those guys, except for Jimmy Johnson, who would bring his own Gretsch because he really loved that guitar, the other guys would tend to just fly to New York, and they would go to Manny's and they would rent instruments there. So they would grab, or I mean, they would call them up, or they'd go in the store and they'd get a Telecaster and they'd rent it, for the time they were going to record, and that was that. They didn't care, they didn't bring their own guitar. Also, of course, amps had in-house gear, in-house amps, and so you can clearly see in the photos from those sessions that Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jamot and Tommy Cogbill are all playing through Ampeg amplifiers, because that was kind of the amplifier of the New York session scene during that time. I think, through the 60s and 70s even, that it was mainly Ampeg amps that you saw. All right, and yeah, Tommy was originally from the outside of Jackson, Tennessee, and he died in Nashville, and he was such a great bass player, but he was also a great guitarist. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Booker T. Jones. So, of course, Booker T. Jones is famous for being the namesake of Booker T and the MGs, for being, one of the greatest B3 players of all time. What you probably don't know is that Booker is such an amazing guitarist, and he played one of my favorite guitar lines of all time, which is William Bell's I Forgot to Be Your Lover. And if you watch this channel, you've probably heard me play this before, and to me it was just kind of a gut punch in the best way to find out it was Booker T. Jones. And thanks to John Leventhal for being able to find that out, because he asked William Bell, and he was the one that told him that it was Booker T. Jones playing guitar on that. And also, yeah, I Forgot to Be Your Lover, and also Every Day's a Holiday. That's another one that features Booker T. playing his Silvertone guitar. Just a really beautiful guitar part. And I think what really makes it stick out is just how melodic and sophisticated it is without being like overly so, without being, like flaunting anything, I should say. It's just a really great guitar part. I love it. And, Booker T is a trained musician. During the early days of Booker T and the MGs, he was driving off to college and up in Illinois, and he persevered, and he got his music degree, and he wrote great arrangements, and he arranged most of the stuff that Booker T and the MGs did, especially when you get onto like Macklemore Avenue, which is their tribute to the Abbey Road Beatles album. A lot of that is really, Booker T kind of telling pretty much everyone what to play except for Al Jackson Jr. And, what a great guitarist, musician, keyboard producer, Booker T. Jones. All right, to do our last one, I need to switch instruments. So we're going to take off the 67 Maplecap Tele, and I'm playing through my Headstrong Lil King amp today, with my little pedal board. And here I'm going to get my old Junker acoustic with a sound hole pickup. And the reason I'm switching over to this is because we're going to play the intro to the tune Chain of Fools by Aretha Franklin. So we've been kind of Aretha heavy on this. So 3 out of the 4 examples are from Aretha Franklin. But so our final guitarist is Joe South. So Joe South is much more known as an artist for his hit of Games People Play, or as a songwriter. You know, of course, he wrote the great tune Rose Garden that was a huge hit for Lynn Anderson in the early 70s. But Joe South was also a session guitarist for a while, and he was hired by Jerry Wexler to play on the Aretha Franklin's Queen of Soul record, or Lady Soul, I should say. And he was one of 3 guitarists on those sessions. So you had, of course, you had Tommy Cogbill on bass, you had Jimmy Johnson on playing rhythm guitar, then you had both Bobby Womack and Joe South playing kind of lead guitar, and so they were used for different things. So Bobby, of course, was very much a R&B double stop guitarist who was hugely influential to Reggie Young, and so that's the things like you hear on Groove In and some of the other tunes. Also, there's another guitarist, Eric Clapton, plays on a cut too, but he's only on one cut, and you can really tell it's him. But Joe South was hired to do kind of his funky version of Pop's staples. And that's exactly what he did on Chain of Fools. So this tune, no one has ever even guessed at who played guitar on it. And then everyone that hears it thinks it's a baritone guitar. And it's not. It's actually a Gretsch Chet Atkins guitar that Joe South had, that because the tune Chain of Fools was cut in C, and he wanted to do his Pop Staples impression, he tuned his guitar down 2 whole steps and put some tremolo on and proceeded to play this really funky part. If I can do it for you now. Total pops all the way. And, it just really sounds the part, when you, of course I don't have a Gretsch, so I'm just using this acoustic that has a sound hole pickup, and I'm running it through my amp with some tremolo on it. And, you tune it down, and it really gets that funky pops, kind of sound. And that's what they were going for. And, through the tune, Joe South plays, some simple, kind of gut bucket Delta blues kind of things like Pops, just playing simple Delta blues lines as fills. But that tune is really a vehicle for Joe South playing in the Pop Staples style. Yeah. It's a really fun tune. I think it's funny in that Aretha and Mavis Staples, they were friends, but also they were a little bit, friendly competitors. So I thought it was interesting that Aretha would do a secular tune in a very much Staples singer style. I mean, if you think about it, Chain of Fools is really, a friendly ripoff of the Staples singers, style of music, and expertly done. Side note on this is that on some of the outtakes of Chain of Fools, you can hear Jerry Wexler telling Joe South to check his tuning, which of course it's really difficult when you tune a guitar down 2 whole steps and you have the strings flopping around. That's why I had to use this acoustic also, was that, all my other guitars that have like 9.5s or 10s, they would just get totally flopped out. And so that's why I'm using this acoustic with a sound hole pickup to kind of get that sound. All right, guys. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode looking at 4 R&B guitar greats that played on really iconic tunes and that have kind of been forgotten, or like I said, worse yet, had their guitar parts credited to someone else. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.